Aronson. I do not have an official position in the game industry. I just like knowing stuff about how it works. And we're going to go through and do introductions of our panelists. We're missing one. Hopefully he will show up. But for the folks that we have, what I'm looking for is your name, the company you work for. What business is your company in? Like, it might be retail, it might be publishing, maybe it's multiple things. And then what is your role in the company? I'd like to start with Jennifer, down at the end.
I'm Jennifer Ward. I am the chief squirrel and owner of Crazy Squirrel Game Store in Fresno, California.
And that is a
retail location. We sell a full range of products, so board games, card games, role-playing games, and miniature games.
Cool. Andrew.
I'm Andrew Hackard. I work at Steve Jackson Games out of Austin. We publish tabletop, role-playing, card, board games, just sticking our toe into digital waters. We also technically have a retail outlet. We have an online store. I work on a game called Munchkin. I'm the line editor, which basically means anything that says Munchkin crosses my desk.
Thank you.
My name is Elisa Teague. I am a game designer. I hate this question. This is the worst question in the world.
I'm sorry.
I'm a game designer. I've been working in the industry for 18 years, and throughout that time, I've done every facet of pre-production through production. And I used to work for First Playroom Entertainment for a number of years, and then Lone Shark Games. And now I am a freelance game designer and consultant, and I'm also president of Geek Out International. We are a game design collective, and we represent other designers also. So I've done a little bit of everything. What I do, I don't know. I do a million things.
Right.
Game designer, puzzle designer, and
lots of focus on design, but also many other things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Carol.
My name is Carol Monahan. I'm the vice president and co-owner of Cheap Ass Games in Seattle, Washington. I have been working on and off in the industry since 1993, when I started as the director of sales for a little tiny company called Wizards of the Coast. And I was in sales and then logistics and some sort of background in operations and purchasing at Wizards back then. At Cheap Ass, which is just me, my husband, and we now have a marketing director. I do finance, operations, employee benefits, all that stuff that is not graphic design, that is not game design. I'm not on the creative side, I'm other stuff.
Excellent, thank you. So the goal here is to learn about money in games, right? Why do games cost what they cost? Where does that money go when you pay for it? That sort of thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into some questions that I have about costs, and then some questions that I have about pricing, and then maybe some questions about strategy. And at the end, if we've got 30 seconds left, we might have time for like one question. There's also going to be a little interlude because some of the panelists have a picture or a graphic or something that we might be able to show you to kind of see what some of this looks like, right? I'm going to jump into costs, and I'm going to use the piece of paper that has my questions on it rather than this one here. Okay, so first question. This is sort of the big one, like overview survey sort of thing. We're going to talk about costs. Now we've got three people who are more on the sort of design, generation, publishing. We've got one person on the retail. Come to the retail last, right? So let me start with, I think, Andrew.
Okay.
What are the sort of major costs that go into a game? And you can all take the question, but let's just start.
Sure. Obviously, the biggest cost is on everybody is printing the game. If you're going to have a game on a shelf, you have to get that game made. And that is just money that you pay out to a factory somewhere, or sometimes multiple factories, which means you're also paying for assembly.
Andrew, I'm going to back up because I asked you an imprecise question.
Okay.
So I think that it's kind of, there are materials that go into it. There
Sure.
is cost to pay designers and artists. There's printing. There's just distribution, and I may not remember what all the different costs are. So I want to ask you. Not just what the costs are, but like which ones are the big costs, which ones are the little costs, that sort of thing. What's the breakdown?
It kind of depends on the project. A game that's brand new, a lot of the cost goes to paying artists, paying designers, developers, just the overhead time of actually creating and making a game. We do almost entirely in-house design, so a lot of that overhead is just salary and wages. And then the manufacturing of, we write a printer a check and they send us back a game. We also pay our distributors, and pay them a lot sometimes, to actually take the games from our warehouse to their warehouses to the retail stores to hopefully you guys.
Okay. What, there's any costs that Andrew didn't mention there?
I was just thinking about like royalties.
Oh.
Sometimes we have a licensed product, like say we have things that are licensed from Power Profits, and so there's a percentage always for the person who's intellectual property producing.
Right, there's also shipping and logistics from the printer to your warehouse, and flooring costs if you don't have your own warehouse and you're paying a warehouse to pick and pack each product. That gets built in, or it should get built into the cost of each of your games, but a lot of people overlook that cost. I think a lot of new designers that try their hand at Kickstarter get, pardon my language, but screwed by that because they don't think about how much it costs both to ship the game to you and then also ship it out to people. And then, depending on what
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My attention, please. It's the officer of the watch speaking from the bridge. Our crew emergency response drill has now been concluded. Our crew drills are vital for the safety of everyone on board, and we appreciate your support during this morning's drill. All future alarms that you may hear on board should be treated as an actual emergency alarm, and you should listen carefully and follow instructions in future announcements. Once again, all future alarms that you may hear on board should be treated as an actual emergency alarm.
That's when
and
you
should
panic,
listen
everybody.
carefully and follow instructions in future
Don't panic
announcements.
now.
Well,
Gotta clear
this
it.
is fantastic. Because now
Attention
I'll
all
just
crew,
hear that again.
debrief will be
Every
in the
time
training
I watch
room
this in the future.
at 10 past 11. Debrief, training room at 10 past 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyway, depending on what segment of the market that you are in, another overlooked thing is game testing. Because once you start crossing over from hobby market games that are, geared towards adults, towards more mass market or family-friendly games that are for ages 13 or lower, there are testing costs that people have no idea is a thing, and then they get in big trouble.
No, and yeah, if you're distributing into Europe, our stuff is not CE. We're just like, it's for the US, but
Yeah.
you have to get
If-
CE.
yeah, if
Your
you-
stuff is not what?
CE.
CE.
That means like it passes all the regulations of the European Union.
Their standards are much higher than our standards. Surprise!
Because they care about their children.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's the type of thing where if you have, like, I worked on a game that had 6 different color dice in it. They were all the same die, and same, same company that we were sourcing the dice from, whatever. But every single color needs to be tested separately. And so it's beyond just the choking hazard and all of that. They actually test for toxins and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, there are certain countries and certain testing facilities that go down to testing the inks that are printed onto the cards. It's very expensive, and it must be done. To get into certain stores in the U.S. also, they require testing certificates, the bigger chains, generally speaking. But
Jennifer, tell us about the retail costs.
The retail costs, so we're 4,000 square feet. Only 2,000 of that is retail. 2,000 of it sits with tables and chairs for people to play games, which means I've got half of my store that doesn't generate money. So I've got to absorb that in my retail costs as well. So basically, because I'm a brick and mortar store, I've got expensive rent because my store has to be appropriate for people to be inside. I have air conditioning. Fresno gets to well over 110 on a regular basis. Sometimes games are in they're a short print or they're a one-time print. So if I want to have tons of copies of it, I have to buy 100 copies instead of 4 I need that week. And so that means I have to have a stock room to fill all that in. So basic difference between us and online stores, online you're paying warehousing prices, which are a lot less expensive. You don't have to air condition that warehouse. It has to be climate control or it doesn't have to be air conditioned. And my employees like to cash for paychecks every week. So I gotta make sure that I have money in the bank.
So demanding.
I know. I can't just work and not complain.
Jennifer, do you get discounts if you buy in bulk from distributors?
Different distributors have different policies. The biggest distributor alliance, you hit different discount levels based off of how much money you spend with them. They're my secondary distributor. I use a different one called ACB more often. Their warehouse is closer to me. I prefer their customer service. So I actually pay slightly more than I actually need to because they take care of me more. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And then a lot of times, we also go direct from publishers. Different publishers will give you different discounts. Many distributors, you have to order so much money to get free shipping. So I have to, well, do I need $10 worth of games this week? Because I got to order 500 to get free shipping. Which in our case isn't that hard. We're big enough. I'm buying thousands of dollars worth of games every week. So I usually get free shipping. But yeah, that makes a difference. What am I doing? If I'm COD with a company, then there's COD charges on top of that as well. And while that doesn't sound like a lot, that all affects how much money in the end I can make, because I'm a capitalist. I want to make money.
Right. And for people in publishing, talk to me about how much you get out of larger print runs. Because clearly that's going to cost you less.
Well, there's that whole thing of risk, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we can look at a game, and usually like Kickstarter, we look at, okay, what's the minimum print run that makes economic sense? Which a lot of times is like 4,000 units plus. But we'll get a much better price if we're doing 10,000 units. That'd be awesome. We'd love to be making 10,000 units. But if half of them wind up sitting in your house, then that's, yeah, suddenly all the equations are way off.
Yeah, you can focus on the per unit cost and say, okay, well, like you said, I'm going to print twice as many as I need because the per unit cost is so much better. I get a much better margin on the ones that I sell. But if you print 10,000 and sell 4,000, that's a really poor investment. If you print 4,000 and could have sold 10,000, that is also a very poor investment.
You also need to do market analysis, because if you print a game at, I always quote 3, 5, 10 for any opening run of a game. And so I see what the price difference is, and based on previous games.
When you say 3, 5, 10?
3,000, 5,000, and 10,000 copies. So I'll have a spec sheet, and then I fill it out for my printer, and I say this is my ideal paper quality. This is my substitute if you can't give it to me. And I have everything, 2 columns for every single line item on my spec sheet, and then I say quote both of these versions, and also give me the quote in 3,000 units, 5,000 units, and 10,000 units, and then I will fiddle with it until I feel that the price makes sense for what the MSRP target is for that project. And then I do the math and I say, will this game make money? There have been lots of games where when I was the intake person, so inventors would come to me and pitch games to me, games that I loved, that I was like, this is the coolest game in the world, but I cannot make money by producing this game, and I didn't take it. Because it could be the best game, but if it's going to be completely priced out of its market because it has like 10 different dice with 10 different molds, and it still looks like a little dice game that should be $25 in a little tin, but it's actually going to, the MSRP has to be like $70 to make money. There's no way you can market that. So there's a lot that goes into it.
How a game displays. That's a huge difference.
Oh,
because if it's in a small tin, $25.
Yeah, there's a perceived value when a customer walks into a store and picks up a box. It's a lot of reasons why, and a lot of gamers hate this. Like I see it on Boardgaming Panel all the time. They're like, why do I have this giant box that only has like a deck of cards and a die in it? Well, it's because there are certain retailers that want the smallest footprint possible because they have a tiny little game store, and there's certain retailers that say, you must have a footprint that has forward-facing marketing value in this size box or we won't carry it. And it's, for the manufacturers, it's a juggle because can't make everyone happy.
We're going to come back to a lot of this pricing and presentation stuff. No, it's great. I have another question about costs, and then we're going to get into some of the display stuff. So, what was that? Oh, right. Okay, the fun question. Okay, what's an example or something comes to mind of an unexpected cost that hit you? Like wait, where did this come from?
I have the retailer theory of a random $1,000 every month. Every month I will spend a random $1,000 on something I did not plan. So last month, Wizards of the Coast announced some new background check rules that we have to abide by if you want to be a Wizards Play Network store. Talking with my lawyer cost me $625.
To learn about background checks.
To learn about, in California, what can I legally do? What can I do with that information? Do I have to send it to Wizards? To basically find out you can't do anything Wizards tells you you have to do.
Awesome. Hey, you might get to spend more money to figure it out.
So exactly. So, but that was my rant. The month before that, I had a condensation leak in my heating system that cost me $1,000.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to talk about problems in my HVAC in my house. You ready?
I have one. We've done a Kickstarter. We had an item that was one of the offerings that was added later on. We had gotten a sample. It was fine. We got the shipment in, and then we realized the color scheme was not ideal, and the print quality, and we just had to expense those and use them for promotional, like not to be the ones we sent to the customers. We had to do a whole nother run of this one little item for the customers who paid through the Kickstarter, because we're like, these are not, I mean, they're okay to do as a cheap giveaway, but they are not okay.
How much of a cost was that?
It was like $3,500.
$3,500 just written off.
Yeah, just, but we do get to recoup some of that through promotional use of those. But
yeah. Cool.
I have 3. I'm trying to remember them all as I talk because I talk too much. I'm so sorry. But number 1, port strikes are wonderful surprises. So very often.
So that's a delay. How is that a cost?
Well, because there are a lot of times if you have retailers that have ship dates, street dates that they must meet, especially if this happens with, for me, I deal with a lot of catalog companies for like the children's and educational games that I write. And so a catalog company will say, we must have it in our warehouse by this date, or it must be, even some stores for like Christmas time for holiday, it must be in the store or they cancel your order. And so if all of a sudden you know that you were going to be selling 3,000 units just to one customer and that order is canceled, it is a huge blow in expenses.
Or you have to expedite the freight.
Yes, yeah, and that was my next thing. For various reasons, this is why you hear about a lot of game companies air shipping things to Gen Con. It's like, oh, our printer was late, or something happened, or we got pushed off the schedule or whatever. We're gonna just air ship some units to Gen Con. That cost is usually so much more than you even like pay for your game that it's really written off as a marketing expense just to have those games there in front of all of your eyes, because to have a booth there and then have an empty booth with nothing to sell is devastating. So a lot of people end up doing it. And people wonder why it happens all the time, but there are so many reasons for delays. And air shipping is a crazy, like, if you plan ahead, you can mostly avoid it, but there are things that come up all the time. And then the last thing is, which we didn't mention before, is advertising. There's not a whole lot of advertising done in the game industry, except like there's web advertising, like on Boardgaming, the banner ads and things like that, or the various distributors have ads in their magazine, the Legal Monthly or Patriot magazine, and things like that people don't think about.
Right.
And
So,
just the expensive marketing programs.
Oh, yeah,
To the extent that you're sending free stuff to demo people, that you're
All right.
t-shirts.
Lay it on us, Andrew. What do you got?
So we've been doing some licensed games, and if you sign a license, let's say it's a 3-year license, and you figure, okay, it'll take us probably 6 months to 9 months to actually produce the game and start selling it, and that turns into 18 months, and then there's delays on printer delays or something. You have 1 year to sell those games, which is probably not enough time to sell your print run, which means you have to renew the license, and that is often unexpected.
How much does a license cost?
It varies by the license. It's so up and down.
So there's a wide. Okay. Can you give us any examples?
So, honestly, no, because I don't typically negotiate the licenses.
Anybody want to take a stab at
I
that?
can't name names,
Okay.
but I will say that it's been as cheap as for like a mostly unknown children's book with like $1,000 upfront fee and then like 5% on the back end of a license, all the way up to like big name people that where they want guarantees of $50,000-$100,000 runs. I'm sorry, in their royalties, with upwards of close to 15-20% on licensing. So it just depends.
What kind of volume of units would you have to ship to give somebody $100,000 in royalty?
No, like over $1 million. I mean, those are companies that look at mass market sales. right? So they're not looking at the mom and pop friendly local game stores. Yeah. They're looking at, you know, your game's going to go into like Target or one of those places.
So the math is different, say, for Kickstarter, because in Kickstarter, the publisher then becomes all the way to retail, and so the cut that the licensor gets is based on retail rather than wholesale.
Yeah, right. Carol, like, so basically, what she's saying, the most royalties, even for designers, not even licensing royalties, are based on invoice. So if a manufacturer sells direct to a game store at 50%, the invoice that the royalties paid on is at 50% mark. The manufacturer sells to a distributor at 60% off, because then they sell it to her at 50%, and that's how they make their money. The invoice amount that the royalty or the licensing fee goes off of that smaller amount. But if I'm a manufacturer and I go to Gen Con and I have my own booth and I sell it at retail or through Kickstarter at retail, the size of the pie is bigger because the percentage is off of the whole MSRP.
It's off like receipts to the publisher.
I thought of a horrible example of an unexpected
Okay.
cost. So, our first Kickstarter was Ogre Designer's Edition, which was a £28 $100 game.
Which was a what?
£28 $100 game.
28 pounds.
Giant.
Yes.
Okay.
And that game we had planned to ship in late 2012, and we ended up shipping it in late 2013. And in the course of that year, the shipping charges that were already huge became exorbitant just because of oil prices, world events, just general inflation of costs. And so instead of making a tiny little bit on every copy we sold except to Brazil, we ended up just kind of basically breaking even on the entire project because the shipping costs had grown so much in that extra year that we didn't account for.
Yeah, USPS prices go up almost every year. Every January.
It's twice.
Yeah, it's horrible. Like, and when you're just mailing a letter, so it's like, oh, okay, went up a penny, not a big deal. But when you're mailing games, it really makes a difference.
What size run, how many units do you have to sell to call a product a success?
Depends on the product.
I mean, I expect this to be a range, but throw something out at me. Give me an
Most
example.
people say that in the hobby game market, like if you sell 3,000 or 5,000 units, it's like a huge success. Like it's a success.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that how Steve Jackson Games looks at it?
It depends on the product. Some of our products, so our printer has an MOQ, minimum order quantity, of typically 5,000, and we stick with one manufacturer for almost everything we do. Because we have gotten really good prices from them by giving them literally all of our business. But we are printing typically minimum 5,000 units of a game. Some games, that's not enough. Some games, that is actually a little too many. A Munchkin game, if it only sold 5,000, we would consider a horrible failure.
Well, but that's just against expectations.
Right.
Right? It still might have been profitable.
But your expectations say what the print run's going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Fair enough.
So those
Yeah.
are tied.
Fair enough.
And
Okay.
if we're planning to, again, print 5,000 and sell through them in a year's time, and we print 5,000 and it takes 4 years to sell through, we're paying inventory taxes on stuff we haven't sold yet. We have to find somewhere to put it, which we work with a company called PSI out of Atlanta that has a 250,000 square foot warehouse, so finding space is not the problem. Having them find it after we put it on the shelf is sometimes the problem.
I can put your question into perspective from like a game. Like I don't know how many of you guys are planning to produce your own games versus just game designers and wanting to know or whatever. But from
Well, a little bit of
game-
audience interaction just
Yeah,
quickly. For why you're here, how many people are hoping to, how many people here are in the industry right now? Board game industry. Okay. How many people would like to be in the board game industry? Cool. How many people are just kind of curious about, how things work? Okay. Did I miss any major categories? Okay.
How many people are just here for the next panel?
It's not Comic-Con, like-
Okay.
So from a game designer perspective, and that's why I shake my head at 5,000 units, because it's like, so we're going to go back to that thing that we were talking about royalties. So, and I'm going to really use round even numbers because it's early and I haven't had enough coffee and I don't want to do that. But if a game is a $20 card game at MSRP, and it's sold to the distributor at $10, at $8 because wholesale is $10. That's $8 invoice, right? And so if I commanded 10% royalty, which the average in the industry is 6%. But we're going to do nice round numbers and say that I'm like really
Sure.
like
Let's
killing
do
it.
it. Round.
I'm now making 80 cents on every game sold, times 5,000 units on a game that I have worked for months and months and months on. You can see what I'm being paid for my time.
Right.
So when I say 5,000 units is a success in the industry,
It's doing well compared to others, but it's maybe not letting
it's
you
doing
live in
well by industry, hobby game industry standards, but I mean, if I spent 1 month on that game, that would be like enough for basic salary, right? So those are things that a lot of people are like, wow, we get into the game industry, and they don't really realize. That's why a lot of game designers try to be as prolific as possible, and so that they get evergreens going so that they can get those royalty checks and they start to stack up. But if you have one product and it sells 5,000 units and then you're done,
Right.
you're not making you're not even making $5,000.
When you have people that are super prolific, you have the last 2 years. There were, in November and December, we added like 48 new board games to our inventory. That's maybe a third to a quarter of what actually released in that time. So I chose about a third of the games that came out. When we opened 7 years ago, if a board game sold 4 units a year, that was considered successful. I mean, post-release. If a board game can't maintain at least 6 turns a year now, it goes away. It goes in my clearance rack, and it's gone. And never comes back. I don't order one-offs of games anymore, so I need to order at least, I need to think that I'm going to sell at least 4 copies of that game in the first 2 weeks it comes out for me to even consider bringing it out. Sometimes you have Legends of the Five Rings CCG, where I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to order 48 copies of this, and I hope I can sell it in 2 weeks, and I sold it before I unpacked it out of the box. And then sometimes you have other games where I'm like, I'm going to order 8 copies of this, and we'll sell it immediately, and it's all 8 copies are currently on my clearance rack.
All right, we're going to segue from cost to pricing by using a couple of pieces of paper that we have. So Jennifer has with her a breakdown of the costs of her store. I think this is based on a $100 game. Is that right?
So I also easy math early in the morning. So $100 game. This is our estimate of breakdowns in 2017, which was a relatively rough year in retail for a number of reasons. We pay about, on average, 55% for a board game. Right? I love it. 50% of the board game makes me happy. There are a couple of companies that do that. Not everybody does that. There's a couple of companies where they're like, enjoy your 35% that you get off. And I'm like, oh, enjoy me not selling your game. Wow, that's terrible. So 55% of my stuff goes to cost of goods, just flat out what I'm paying for a game. Staff comes up second. My staff pay, I'm in California, so we have a minimum wage hike every year until 2020. Which is great. I strongly believe in a living minimum wage, but it also means that every year I'm absorbing automatically a 10% increase in what I'm paying. My rent is next. It's super expensive. I'm in California. Yay, California. Other things that you don't think about, we had about a 3% shrink last year. That means about 3% of my stuff either got stolen, or we put it in the system wrong, or I got it dinged and dented from the distributor, and it takes months and months to get a refund on that, so I just take it and I'm like, all right, that's all it costs, and that kind of stuff. Credit card processing costs me on average about 1.5% to 2%, kind of depending on, if you're running your credit card for less than $5, all of us brick and mortar people kind of hate you. Just know that. Run it for more than $5. Cash is a beautiful thing. Cash we get to keep all of. Taxes that don't include sales tax. So my inventory tax at the end of the year, I'm in California, so there's a guy from the Department of Agriculture that will come over and find out how many scanners we have and tax me on that. That kind of stuff is in there. My legal fees cost me stuff. So if you look at this, my net profit off of a $100 game is about $3.40.
Cool.
That's a lot of work. That's about half of what it should be.
Well, and comparing that to the 3% walking out the door accidentally or ding, and the 2 and whatever from credit card
That makes me
companies,
so
it's
happy.
a very thin.
Yeah, it's a pretty thin margin. Like if you do something wrong,
Where's your sorry, I wanted you to finish what you were saying.
That is it. Like, we have to be really, if we guess wrong on a game, we're just done, right? You're just like, you can't do that. So that is why we're a brick and mortar store that charges MSRP in most cases. And I know that a lot of people don't like that, but that's one reason why we do, because I'm not driving a Ferrari, right? And I'm not guilting any, like, you shop where you need to shop. I don't expect to get all of their hobby dollars. I'm there so that we can gatekeep for you. I'm there so that you can come in and see stuff. I'm there for instant gratification. Last year we won the Power Retailer Award to Organized Play, which means we run one of the best organized play programs in the country. We have events every day. All that takes money and time. So that's why a lot of brick and mortar stores are putting that extra on. A lot of people are hurting because Magic the Gathering has not done well for a couple of years. And so if you're a store that's mainly a card game store, you've suffered. Fortunately, we're not mainly a card game store. So, all right, I'm done. Now that your 8 is up on the wall.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't know exactly what we're looking at here.
Okay.
Carol, can you give us the
I'll
brief
explain what this is.
overview?
Okay, I have this little line here that's from $0 to $1, and that's MSRP. And so you were talking about the 50%, or
Right,
one way or
what
the
we get
other.
our cost.
So that top 50 cents-ish goes to retailer operations. And then we have distributor operations in here, which they get it from the publisher somewhere around between 32 and 40 cents, depending on, like, we're at PSI as well. There's the chunk that goes to the publisher services, who then get it out to distribution.
Let me just make sure I understand what we're talking about. So for $1 spent on retail, we're talking about where the cents go.
So like a
they go to the
game,
retailer, to the distributor, etc.
The retailer, to get that $10 game, is paying around $5.
Yes.
And then the distributor is paying around $4. And so the publisher gets somewhere under that $4, of which we, like, to say this is $10 game, we're trying to, for us at least, pay less than $1.50 for that game, if we can, because otherwise we don't have enough room to live.
So you're saying that if the distributor is buying something, so if a retail price is $1 and the distributor is buying it for 35 cents or 40 cents, you're hoping your costs are around 15 cents. So that in that difference of maybe 20 cents, you're going to cover all of your costs, and then maybe buy some bread and eggs and things.
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry if everybody else got that.
But this is like, I did it as $1 because then it's percents. You know, it's like, easy to look at that. But this 15% target cost of goods, I mean, that's sort of the rule of thumb.
Right.
And you know,
I have an 8 too, but it's on this thumb drive, so you can look at it.
Yes. Sorry, we weren't
but
able to get
it
that
is
going.
very close to talking. It's talking about the reverse side of this. Is how do you calculate what your MSRP is?
Right,
And it's
right.
basically the reverse of this chart. So
yeah, you're looking at, you're like, okay, this is going to cost me $1.50 to print this deck of cards. Then my
it
MSRP
has to
should
be 10. It has to be $10. And if you can't get it, and if there are your main and retail customers say, no, we want to sell this at $6.99, you either can't do it, or you try to cut paper quality or the type of box that it's in, or put it in a tough box instead of a setup box, or whatever it is to try to get it down there. But yeah, I'm still holding this up like you guys can actually see what's on there. But the reverse thing that I had on here was, how do you go from $1.50 to that $10 mark? And it's an argument that I was telling Andy that I've had with a lot of people. A lot of manufacturers will say, oh, five times cost of
So
goods.
we're talking about how to determine what the MSRP should be based on the cost.
This is backwards down, yeah.
And
so
one of the
they say
things is 5
that's
times cost.
20% is way too much.
Well, 5 times cost of goods is not what I do at all.
You're gonna do
I
like
want 6 times landed cost.
And what does that mean? What is
that
landed
means
cost?
shipped and in my warehouse.
Like, I have it in my hands.
Yeah. So the full cost, so that what you figure in what it costs for that container to get from wherever it's being manufactured and stored into my warehouse, I do 6 times landed, because you can do the math on at any price point, kind of like what you've done with this percentage, and on a 3,000 unit run, or even if you go higher than that, your first run will not make enough profit to make a second run. if you do 5 times cost.
Andrew, you look like you're eager to jump in here.
I was just thinking, Munchkin came out in 2001 as a $24.95 game, $25 game. And that first Munchkin run was a box, a rule sheet, and 168 cards. Didn't include a die, didn't include any marketing materials. The box was, according to people in Boardgame Geek, way too big for what was inside. But one of the hidden costs was that was actually a standard box size at our manufacturer, which meant it was cheaper than a smaller box would have been. Because they already had them, all they had to do was print the wrap and put it on. Munchkin is still a $25 game 17 years later. And we've done a lot of tricks to make it work. Working with our printer, Grand International out of Boston, is west of Boston, Massachusetts. I live in Texas, it's all Boston. Giving them all of our business has helped keep our printing costs down, but we've had to make some changes. We made the box slightly thinner. We made the rules sheet stock slightly thinner. We went from a 16mm die to a 14mm die, which saved us more money than you would think. Because if you do the volume calculation, you're saving about 1/3 of the materials on that die.
Okay, so what price games will people buy? And do they fall into sweet spots? Like, I don't see a whole lot of $17.37 games, for instance. So
They're out there. Yeah, we have $16 and $17 games because they're a certain size. And honestly, when we're looking at a game, we already know, we're like, okay, this will go in an unexploded cow box. That means it is either, well, we do have one game that is 35 that's in that box, but it weighs twice as much. So when somebody picks it up, they can go, oh, this has a bunch of dice in it, okay. But normally that box is a $25 box. If we have something that's like basically the size of a bridge set, like a double deck, it'll be like 16 or 17. If it's a single deck, it's going to be 10 or less. I mean, there's just, because we know what people...
Yeah,
So
it's all psychological, really.
That's
That
literally what I was gonna
99-cent
say.
thing, like $4.99, that should not work. It works every time. I've seen people pick it up. Oh, look, it's $4, and I'm like, it's $4.99. It's $5. That's math. Yeah. But it works. So we do that. There's a great book called Why We Buy by Paco Underhill, and it not only goes through retail operations. We're Americans. We turn to the right when we go into a store. So when you go into Target, all their cash registers are on the left. You're not looking over there. But it also talks about pricing and such like that. Around Christmas, $20 games are great. Everybody has a white elephant gift party they have to go to. They need a $20 or less game. We make a display just for that every year. It gets just rampaged every year. 20, 25, 50, and 100 is kind of where our sweet spots are in the store.
Any other opinions on where the sweet spots are? I mean,
It is, I would say, I have seen people who look at a Pandemic Legacy that's $60 or $70 and they're like, why is this not 50? And I'm like, because it's you're getting well over that in play value because you're going to play this game 12 to 24 times. We have a game called Castellan that we are very proud of that I don't want to say tanked, but did not sell according to our expectations. And that game had a couple of problems. It has a lot of plastic pieces. The box is not as attractive as we would like. We made some design decisions that didn't work out in that. But it's basically a castle building game for 2 players. And you have cards and you're building the castle, but it's got a lot of plastic. It is overpackaged for shelf presence. And when we did our pricing analysis, we said, okay, to make money according to our usual guidelines, this has to be a $35 game. The problem is Castellan feels like a $25 game. And it's a 2-player $35 game, which is an even harder sell. We've done 2 versions, so you can play as a 4-player, but now it's a $70 game, and we are in the Pandemic Legacy Twilight Imperium space with a much simpler game. And to get to that price point, we overprinted, which means we now have thousands of copies in our warehouse that are not moving.
so I heard some interesting things in there. How much a game feels like it should cost, right? So this segues into what I wanted to ask: is are there different types of, for the different sort of genres of game? Are there, and I think there are different price points, and kind of what are they? Like, I mean, there's card games, there's miniature games, party games, right? So you talked about 20, 25, 50, whatever. is that for all games across the board, or is that for a particular type of game?
I mean, that was clearly board games. Like, those price points kind of go to the different genres within that. A card game is a $20 to $25 game. It's going to be hard for me to sell it more expensive than that unless it's Dominion and you pick up a box and you're like, oh, there's thousands of cards in here. A game with tons of pieces in it is usually around an $80 game because you pick up Armada and you're like, wow, that's a hefty game. Stellan's a great game. Cannot sell it, and I don't understand it. We put it out on our demo table. It's like, if I can demo a game in 5 minutes, I can sell crap ton. If I can't demo a game in 5 minutes, it's a much, much harder sell. So a lot of times, one of the things we look from publishers is, tell me how to sell it, like, make it easy for me. But yeah, within the genres, it's different. But weight makes a difference. Splendor is a great game. It's totally overpackaged, but it's a good game. The Splendor expansion is the same price. And when you pick that box up, you're like, am I buying a box of beer? What's in here? Like, I kind of feel a little bit guilty selling it at that price.
How much power does the retailer have back into distribution, or does the distributor have back into publishing to set prices? How much is it the publisher sets the MSRP and everything flows from there, and how much of this sort of guidance coming back through the system? I'm trying to get at who decides what the prices for things are.
Oh, does anybody, like the consumers sometimes decide the price? Really? That's why you have stores. I have 5 competitors in town. I'm the only one who charges MSRP across the board for most things. A lot of others are 10 or 20% off. When you go into a store and they're like, all board games are 20% off, they've literally cut their profit margin in half from the beginning. So if I'm making $3.50 on a $100 game, they're making $1.70.
There are definitely influences outside of just like the manufacturer just deciding based on this that guide us a little bit more into whether or not we're even going to make the product or where we can fudge a little. And usually from the retail side, it's the bigger retailers that will dictate that. Like normally during this week I am at Toy Fair, which is happening right now.
Because your life is so easy.
Right. Well, the cruise date moved and Toy Fair date skewed a little bit forward because it's usually over Valentine's Day and whatever. But anyway, it's fine. I'd much rather be in this beautiful weather than in freezing cold New York right now. But there are a lot of like pre-sales for the following holiday season, or sometimes we even run things by our bigger customers way ahead of time, like even a year and a half to 2 years ahead of time, and say, hey, this is what we're showing. What do you think? What kind of initial order do you think you would place? And where do you think this falls with competing products in your store? And we can get a gauge. We get a gauge like that at Gamma Trade Show also, which is in a couple of weeks from now, and we'll be falling over this cruise next year.
Yes, it's the exact same.
It's the same.
So
this panel
In
probably
the
won't be
audience, how
happening
many
next
people
year.
here have heard of the Gamma Trade Show? Okay, give us a little bit on what the Gamma Trade Show is. Most people haven't even
It's
heard
the
of it.
game industry trade show.
Yes,
Game manufacturers.
it's pretty much the only one we have.
And retailers.
Yeah.
It is our trade show.
And they have just moved it from Las Vegas to Reno, which means it is now more expensive because flying to Reno costs more.
It sucks.
Because the hotel is cheap.
But the vice president again.
It's in the big
ship right
Yeah.
now, so I don't want to
We're gonna be a little
complaining.
I actually have an example of some feedback loops.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, which is that we came out with TAC, right? We came out with TAC, and it's like a great big $55 fancy wood piece game. And that mostly went out like through Kickstarter and then had a good healthy run in retail stores for about a year. But we did hear it's kind of expensive. It's kind of big, kind of expensive. And we're like, it's kind of big, it's kind of expensive. So we have come back with a smaller edition. And that just launched like this month, which is this University Edition. Now you can't play the full 6x6 game, but most people don't play that. If they want to, they can get the big beautiful box. It's still available, but we went with a more compact, simpler pieces, so we could get it down from $55 MSRP to $40 MSRP, because we figured it's a two-player game, it's an abstract, that would be a better spot for it. And part of that was talking to retailers of both, the sort of Barnes & Noble type and the folks who are doing the normal hobby brick and mortar, and them saying, yeah, it's good, but it's good, but
It's surprising that $49.99 to $55.
Yeah.
It's like a chasm of death right there.
But I bet the
So
catalog
get
companies
done.
want the higher price point.
We're not in any catalogs.
I'm surprised Tack would be so good. I can
Yeah, Tack would be good.
Tack would be so good.
Yeah, no, it got showed and but Barnes and Noble are testing it, but I think they want the smaller edition.
Yeah.
What do you have to do to get into wider distribution in the game stores?
Oh,
How many chickens do you have to sell?
Live on for years, so they notice you're there.
They want to see proven numbers.
They're looking for volume.
Yeah.
They're not looking for price.
They're not, no, they care about, that's all they care about. They care about how many they can sell and how much does it cost. So it's cheap as possible. I mean, if you're talking about like mass market, they want it as cheap as possible and as many as they can sell. And they do not care if it's a good game or not. They want something that's cute or interesting, depending on what market it is, on the front of the package. They want their margins, and that's all they care about. I have a lot to say. I'm super opinionated, by the way. Like, I'm totally pro friendly local game store and whatever, but also as a designer, I want to sell lots of copies. So a lot of game companies will do 2 versions of a game and do like a travel, smaller, cheaper quality version and put it into that. And then like gamers that want quality and whatever will go to the local game store and buy a nicer version at a price that supports that game store, and then you have both worlds. And that's why you'll see, like, there are lots of different games that, like, one's in a tuck box and one's in its beautiful setup box, and it's the same game.
Oh, some companies will package it the same. So we had, when a certain company started to go into a big box store and they downgraded quality to hit those numbers, they used less good paper for the cards, the plastic pieces weren't as good. So people would go to the big box store, buy it, open it, and think, well, there's something wrong with this game. And then they would bring it to me to return it. And I'm like, well, one, you didn't buy that game from me. And I know you didn't, and here's why. But they were like, well, this is clearly something's wrong with it. And I'm like, but that's where it's rough to be a retailer. I want to make you happy. I want you to come back later. But I'm also like, you didn't buy that game from me.
Sure.
Like after Christmas, we have to retell the staff, like, just make sure when you look at games that it's a game we actually sell, because people will return stuff that they didn't get from us.
I will also say at the mass market retailers, you are often not working with the same buyer from one year to the next. Target, for instance, I will pick on them, has a policy of rotating their buyers because they don't want anybody to feel ownership over one particular segment of the store. We got extremely lucky when we first brought Munchkin to Target that we had a buyer who was a gamer, liked games, and stuck around for something like 3 or 4 years until they finally said, okay, you can't do this anymore, you have to move, and he quit and he went to PSI, where he still buys our games.
How much do you all care about what channel your games are purchased through? So this is more for the publishers, obviously. Like, does it matter to you whether it goes, through an online discounter versus a friendly logo or a direct sale? Do you make as much on each channel as the publisher?
I make a little more if it goes to Barnes and Noble than if it goes out into hobby.
And do you care?
But they'll only take a title. They are not going to have my whole line.
Right. Like if I love a designer and want to give them as much money as possible, do you care how I buy it, or are you just happy it's being bought?
The best way to buy it is to buy it. Is to buy it direct, obviously from the manufacturer if they have their own website or something like that, or if you can support them in person at a convention. But when I'm doing sales, just to help out at a convention, or like when I go to Gamma Trade Show and I'm talking to retailers, even I say, hey, you can buy direct from me, and that's even from them to me, not the consumer to me. I say you can buy from me, or if it makes more sense for you, go to the distributor. We also support our distributors. Like, I want to support everybody because we're all playing on the same team here. This is as you can see, the margins in this industry are small, and we are all like we're like competitors but we're also friends. And the more we support each other, the better the industry grows. Right. And otherwise, we're going through another board game renaissance, which is awesome. And there are many factors that are contributing to that. But there was a while there, like 10, 12 years ago, where it was like video games were a huge threat to us, and we had to band together. And you kind of said something, a red flag word, which
Okay.
is online discounters.
Yeah.
There is a move. We're trying. We're trying. Like I'm saying, we. Like I represent all game manufacturers, which I don't. But there are many game manufacturers that are trying to enforce MAP pricing and make sure that there aren't people heavily discounting games.
And
it hurts everybody.
There's stuff beyond the map, which is that most distribution contracts, and I am responsible for the first big one of those when I was at Wizards, they forbid hobby distributors from selling to people who don't have a brick and mortar store. So if you are Alliance, you are, at least back in the day, you were not allowed to sell Magic the Gathering to someone who could not show they at least had a rented storefront.
Right. And
now they could also,
this giant rigmarole you have to go through to get.
but you could also sell online.
But it's so hard to track it now. Like it's really hard. When somebody says, "Hey, I saw your game and it was on eBay or it was on Amazon for a fraction of the price," this is the first thing I say to them. Did you see who the actual seller was? If it wasn't shipped and sold by Amazon or shipped and sold by us, then what store was it? Give me the store name and I will see if they actually have a brick and mortar location. But distributors don't really tell us where they sell their games, and as much as I love them and they are an important part, like it's always been hard for both companies I work for to even put a list of retailers, like find our game at your local retail store. So we call the distributors and say, can you give us a list of the current stores that carry our games so we can update our retailer list to have people go to the stores and buy them, and they're like, no, we will not provide you with who the retailers are. So it's been like this big secret, and it's really hard. And now the new threat, which I don't think has happened to me yet, I haven't heard about it, me personally, but it's affecting several of my friends' games, is Chinese knockoff games that are now all over Amazon, and they look from the pictures like they're the real thing, but they are not the real thing.
Because they'll often take the picture, the official picture, be like, we're selling code names, and you buy it and the words are misspelled. Or the card quality is crap, or the print. I was going to say, the online discounters, again, if they're not getting, you don't know what you're getting when you buy it.
It's sort of an interesting sign of the industry getting to a certain point that there are knockoffs. Like,
Yeah, I never would have thought that there would be knockoff card games like in the marketplace in the U.S. like this.
Okay.
It's crazy.
So my final little bit, and then I think I have time for a couple of questions, is where do you see costs and prices going in the future? Andrew, what do you got?
No, I'm
just
saying
going up.
They're just going up.
I mean, clearly things are going to go up. That's kind of how the world economy works.
But people have this expectation of prices staying the same because like a pair of pants is the same price now that it was 20 years ago. And so we're fighting this squeeze that's happening to everything because transportation is getting more and more expensive and freight and shipping is getting to be a bigger and bigger chunk of the costs. And yet people are like, oh, but I think something should be $20, I mean, how do you...
Well, sometimes it just comes down to the price of wood. Right? Like if you have game pieces made out of wood and when the price goes up...
Man, I am not made of wood.
But yeah, like the price of wood goes up, and that's something that we have no control over.
But wasn't there a massive increase in the price of paper sometime in the last year?
There are paper shortages all the time that we have to deal with, and then it's like, oh, well now do you want French paper, or do you want Chinese paper, or do you want German? Like there's so many different papers, and then certain countries have like deficits in their paper for whatever reason. Climate affects all of this also, and even just things like dice. I mean, dice are made from oil and plastic and whatever, and those prices vary all the time. And it really, you don't think it costs that much because it's like pennies for a die when you're ordering them in the MOQs that we have to order them, but it makes a difference when like it just goes up by a fraction of a cent.
Awesome.
So,
okay.
I don't know.
All right.
Hard questions.
Yes. Yeah. So we're at 5 minutes. I got at least one person who's interested in asking a question. Other people, feel free to raise your hand and you'll get in my queue. Wow, okay, the queue is now. What do you got for us?
So there's been a theme of a lot of board games and card games getting translated to digital and pass-and-play formats. How does that affect the industry, and is that seen as a new opportunity for you guys, or is that seen as a little bit of a threat?
Okay, so how are we going to translate in that to costs and prices?
So-
That's a pretty interesting question.
So, I mean, honestly, is it a more profitable avenue to sell to, the digital?
So is this good? Were we
Yeah.
happy
Is
this
it
channel was
is it a positive thing for the industry, or is it
Do you like
potentially a
that the
negative thing
digital
for the
channel is there? Is that good?
I think the digital channel is something that we have to explore because with Vassal Tabletop Simulator, people are going to write those modules for you if you don't do it yourself. And that's something we've run into repeatedly because we've been slow on the uptake. And we would much rather have somebody pay us $3, $5 for an official Ogre game, Munchkin game, whatever, than have somebody just go ahead and do it and release it for free.
Okay. Good. All right. Second question.
Oh,
You, yes.
I was wondering, on the more expensive, like you've talked about, particularly for Jennifer, you talked about the low end, there's like price sensitivities where people want $20 games. Is there such a price sensitivity on the high end? I know, for example, when I bought the more recent Twilight Imperium, I would have bought like twice the price.
Yeah.
So are you asking the price sensitivity, like how high
Yeah,
can you
how-
go before nobody is going to buy?
Or
Is that
even
it?
like, is there a price beyond which people really are not that sensitive and they'll buy the game?
Oh, so you might as well charge
So like collectors or
$1,000.
completions. So anytime a game comes out with an anniversary edition, we guaranteed it's going to be probably twice the cost of the normal edition. And we'll sell those. We won't bring in a ton, but we'll bring them in. There was the 30th anniversary of Catan 10 years ago. It was $300. That'll sell. We weren't open, but I know I looked at it at my game store at the time. And I was like, I super want that $300 game.
What's the most expensive product any of you have ever sold? Like one. Have you sold something for $300?
Other than like people who will get their tax refund checks and come in and buy cases of magic, because that happens, or the person who got the
That's
tax
not a
refund.
single product, but
No.
it is a product.
I will sell. I mean, we've had board games maybe in the $250 range. We do consignment in the store, so people can come in and sell their games and name their price. And $250, $300 is probably the highest end.
Okay.
That's probably right. We also back some Kickstarter games, and sometimes they'll be expensive, and we'll price them appropriately.
Got a number?
I'm trying to remember the numbers, the
Okay.
exact numbers, but like Apocrypha ran on Kickstarter first, and it sold as the 3 sets of Apocrypha, so the base editions and the expansions, and I think that ended up being 100. And I'm looking at James like he knows, but like
He was not
100.
aware.
He was 99 pledged, and he was going to be 135 at SRP.
Okay, so 135, and then I right before I left Playroom, I was still consulting. I still am. But we did an anniversary edition of Killer Bunnies, which was all of the decks all in one big black box, and that was I think $200 or $220, something like that. Which was still, if you had bought the deck separately, you were saving like $100. So I think that sold pretty well. It was very limited.
Question.
Mine was the same as the first question, actually.
Question.
This is actually mostly for you, and it's also 100% self-serving. I own a board game cafe, which is a different model of it. And have you thought about going into that model? Because you were talking about thin margins, adding the food, there's a lot higher margins, and then kind of changing over to you guys. How do you guys feel about this new rise of gaming and eating establishments kind of coming together? So I guess it's two reasons too.
So we're constantly thinking about how are we going to grow and change, because again, I'm a capitalist. I like drinking. I've definitely looked at adding coffee and sandwiches and things like that. That really comes down to, am I going to have 50 grand it's going to take me to add in all the plumbing and all that I need? Talking to people that own board game cafes too, the success of that model is even narrower than the success of the brick and mortar game store, right? Because cafes, you have to flip tables and make money. Board games, you're not flipping a lot of tables all the time. Yeah, so we're definitely, like my lease is up this year, so I have major decisions. It's like opening the store again for the first time. Do I stay where I'm at? If I do, I have to renegotiate my lease with my landlord who's going to want to increase my rent again. Do I try to go buy a place so that I just own it, and if I ever close my store, hey, I own commercial real estate now, I can be rich. Do I close my store because $3.50 off of a $10 game? I work hard. Do I open somewhere else and change my model? I'm not really sure. In fact, most of this week is me letting my brain rest so that I can go back and then start to make some of those big decisions, because my whole life